So now this is part 2 of the lecture on graphic design. And we're finishing up with typography with one more little note. And that is to give you a vocabulary word, which is pretty simple, layout. A layout is a designer's blueprint for a design. Now the layout would say the margins, what typeface to use, and make any additional notes. I'd like you to all look at your textbook and to notice the layout of the textbook. This is pretty standard for textbooks, but some of it is kind of counterintuitive. Like notice that the inside margin, where perhaps your binder rings are, if you have it in a notebook, that's little. And the outside margin's pretty huge. Now in this case they add some subheadings, another row of text to the outside margin. But even when they don't, this is a typical layout of margins for a printed book. All right, let's move on. Now, among the first widespread images that were produced was something called a broadside. And a broadside was simply a single piece of paper that had a message on it. Now, it might be a political message, a religious message, or an upcoming event that was needing to be publicized. There's a very famous image of the reformer Martin Luther, who founded the Lutheran Church, putting his proclamation on the doors of houses, and that would be a broadside. Now, here we're looking at art by the artist Toulouse-Lautrec. And with the invention of lithography, which is the printing method, we talked about it last week, then prints became much more colorful. And artists quickly picked up from the lithography process the ability to make posters. Now, Toulouse-Lautrec, Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, was a very famous artist in the 1800s, later 1800s. And while he did a lot of painting, he's best known for his lithographed posters. They became collectible almost immediately. Usually they have dancing women on them, and there's a great example in your textbook, but I just liked the cat, the black cat, so I put that out there as well. Now in your textbook also, they talk about a very famous graphic design that's an iPod ad. And apparently this was parodied quite a bit. Now this is a pretty effective ad, very simple statement. Again, the most effective graphic designs are simple. Now there was some parodies made. This one I think is actually another ad of a Chewbacca with the iPod because it's got the Apple logo. But then here's another of the parodies, which is, I just had to include that because it has something to say, shall we say. All right, so let's move on. We're going to talk a little bit about motion and interactivity. With the development of film and television, graphic design took a new turn. It's really graphic design was set in motion. Graphic designers use code to create these dramatic graphic statements. Look at the examples, the example 1012 on page 232. This is a really wonderful example of an advertising graphic design that's extremely effective and really revolutionary for its time. This this aspect of the field of graphic design, it continues to evolve really at light speed, much as the image of the car in the ad moves at light speed. So within our still slides, there's not much I can show you about that, but you can look at the films, and really even our textbook has become dated in this way. In my teaching, I interact with a smart board. That's a graphic means. I use a graphic tablet to create art. And on the internet, there's all sorts of opportunities to interact in a graphic way with art that is moving, that is in motion. So let's look at how we can apply graphic design to the field of fine art. Graphic design is really all around us, whether it's the street signs that tell you there's a curve ahead, or the sign on the restaurant that you go to, or really everything in our life in some way. Well, I can't say everything, but so much of our lives has been developed by a designer. And you can look at the clothes. In fact, some logos have become oh, I don't know, like the Life is Good guy or Nike. They have become kind of symbols in their own right, hip in their own right to have the logo. But I want to talk now about a different aspect of graphic design, which is the graphic design that is pure art for its own sake. And one of the best known and earliest artists to develop this was, of course, Andy Warhol. For those of you that don't know, the lower left, well, that's a picture of him. And what Andy Warhol did, well, first he did get his start in advertising in New York City. And what he did was he took images that were very familiar to us and he turned them into art. He says about the Campbell soup can, which is really, this is how Campbell soup looked for, I guess, 100 years or so. And then apparently they changed it in 1999. So what he said about this original Campbell soup can was that he thought it was a perfect design. So he wanted to bring that into his art. So then we have Marilyn and the cow. But let's look at a few more images by Andy Warhol. Now he was a founder of a field of art called pop art. And in pop art, what he's doing is he's kind of bringing what people think as sort of throwaway culture or popular culture into the realm of art so that maybe we notice it in a new way. Of course, this is Marilyn Monroe, who is a icon in her own way and a kind of a mythic figure because she had such a tragic death and was such a, she was such a sex symbol. So now let's look on to another symbol. This is Che Guevara, who was a friend of Fidel Castro's and helped to overthrow Cuba. Interesting juxtaposition. Both cultural heroes in their own way, both very different, and both taken on by the artist Andy Warhol. Now, Barbara Kruger is another artist, and I encourage you to look at the image of hers that's in the book. And then I found a couple of others, but she also got her start in advertising, and then she went on to make art that was sort of poking fun at advertising. So here we have this one, and then here's one more, which is kind of potent. And I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it to you. It says, "Fear and hate make you small, bitter, and mean." And then it has a lock on this guy's mind. So she took the field of advertising, which was really more like in her day, probably, trying to get you to take Alka-Seltzer or buy a dishwashing detergent, and she used it to make very powerful statements. Now here's work by another interesting artist that's mentioned in your textbook on page 236. And this is Natalie Miebach. And what she does is she takes scientific formulas and graphs of, say, weather, climactic patterns, tides, and she turns them into art. This is called Carrying Antarctica. So here this guy has got this basket thing on his back. Now, really, let's just wrap up this look at graphic design by considering now with the internet, we have such an opportunity to really create a community of designers. There's professional type is often shared on the web, although it's not all at the greatest quality. There's a real feeling of sharing artwork, and my feeling is that because it's all ultimately available, that's probably a good attitude. Whenever people keep a design to themselves or are kind of, hoarding their ideas, then those ideas don't get shared. And the fact is that we are all learning and sharing from ideas all the time. So on that cheerful note, I will say graphic design continues. It continues to evolve in really amazing ways, and one of the most exciting ways is through collaborative media and ways that people can share ideas and build upon ideas in many ways as art continues to evolve. Okay, thanks for listening.